So in this episode of Working Class Citizen, I interview a former teacher named Jessica who quit her teaching job about a year ago due to the lack of support and intolerable conditions teachers go through nowadays in the classrooms. I first saw Jessica on a segment of Vice News on why teachers are quitting and walking out of classrooms. When I heard Jessica speak, I could relate to many of the things she was saying. Although I've never been a teacher, I could understand her pain and frustration by her words. The reason this is important to me is because I'm sure, like most of you, we all possibly had one teacher or educator that influenced us and helped us set life courses like ships that sail the ocean. In many words, without them, who knows where we'd be or how influence can shape you. Another main reason is because if our educators go away, well, our youth goes down the drain with it. In this episode, we hear the perspective of an educator and the many issues and challenges facing teachers today. From the distraction COVID had in schools, to youth suicide, the 2016 presidential election, and the grueling payout of the pandemic, safety concerns regarding school shootings, burning out from the overmounting carryover stress, and the public scrutiny teachers are facing. I begin by asking Jessica what her drive and motivation was in becoming an educator.
My drive for becoming an educator really started in high school, and I thought at the time that I was not going to go to college, or I wasn't sure I would have a research related or kind of higher education degree. And so I really didn't know what I was going to do. And I thought I had all of these great mentors in my life that were teachers. And they were the people who really inspired me to feel like I could take on any challenge. And we're always building that for me, building the next challenge. And I really wanted to be that for students, to whatever it is like that they're interested in, to say, you know what, it doesn't matter if you're good in my class or you even enjoy my class, et cetera, but whatever it is that you want to do, we need to understand the fundamentals to get you there, which is goal setting and looking at, where do your hobbies lie? So really what got me into education was wanting to be that person that I had. I had that person who really, I was not an academic student until about my sophomore year of high school, and didn't, really care until I started to see others caring. And then I had the teachers who really encouraged me to strive to be my best. And my best wasn't others' best, but I wanted to be that for other students, to show them that whatever your best is the best, and that's great, so that's really why I got into teaching, was to be that inspiration for others.
So it turns out you don't need a master's degree to be a teacher. You only need a bachelor's degree. There are certain states that require a master's degree in order to be a full-time teacher.
I got a bachelor's degree in secondary education, and my major, the university that I went to, Michigan State University, you had to major in your subject area content if you were secondary education. So I was a German major with a teaching English as the second language minor. I graduated in 4 years, but then I had a 1-year teaching internship, which is unusual for most programs. They only do half semester, and now Michigan State is even going to be cutting that back because they've had there's a lot of issues. We're on teacher shortage time right now. We need teachers in the profession. They're trying to make it more accessible. And so, yeah, I actually did not do a master's.
So to give you a little bit of an understanding of what Jessica is saying and what I've come to understand, there are generally 4 categories of college degrees: an associate's degree, which is about 2 years if you only decide to go that far, or a bachelor's degree, which is usually around 4 years. And if you want to further your education to a graduate's degree or a doctorate or professional degree, of course, that comes with a little bit more territory and, of course, more money and income.
For secondary and for elementary education, you mainly just need the bachelor's degree, and most teachers go back to get a master's just to bump themselves up on that pay scale to make it worth it to be so you try to go back as soon as possible to get your master's, to make it pay off. And if you're going to be there for 30 years, you want to get that master pay bump. So I did not do that because I did not think that I was going to last a couple years to even be like, yeah, this is going to be worth it for me to get my master's, because I was foreseeing myself possibly already at the, this isn't really working out phase.
So I'm going to drop a little knowledge of what it really costs to earn a bachelor's degree. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, when you include all the expenses like renting a dorm room, supplies you need for living in school, tuition, etc., it costs about $80,000 to $100,000 for a bachelor's degree for those 4 years. What you take out in loans is nearly about $40,000 in debt. So when you sum it all up and include rent and everything, it's going to cost about $80,000 to $100,000. That's not including some of the other colleges that cost around $80,000 just for 1 year of attendance. For example, private colleges cost $32,000 a year for tuition and fees, so that's about $128,000 for the span of 4 years. Remember, that's just for tuition and fees. If you look at out-of-state colleges, they run about $23,000 a year. Over 4 years, that's about $92,000. A public in-state 4-year college is about $9,000 a year, which comes to $36,000 for the span of 4 years. A public 2-year college is about $3,400 a year. That's your average community college that doesn't even come close to $8,000 for the span of 2 years. It is estimated that $1.8 trillion altogether is the entire debt of student loans. And how long does it take to pay these loans? Well, the average is about 20 years. That's also not included the interest rates that come when paying off these loans. That definitely is something to keep in mind when thinking about going for your bachelor's degree.
There's a bachelor's pay scale. There's maybe bachelor's plus, where you've done some work towards your master's, or you have, half the credits towards your master's. And then there's master's, and then potentially higher than that. So there's different pay scales for your degrees. And a lot of teachers that I know who are still in it, they went and got that master's right away, because $38,000 versus $52,000 in your second year or third year, it's a big bump. I mean, that's $10,000 that you're going to be making in the long run. Then it goes to 80 or 90, depending where you're living,
Jessica says a really important thing at the end, depending where you're living. When I started to look into how much teachers make, I discovered it was a question with a long debate and a not so simple straight answer. So according to a report done by CNBC in 2021, research found that teachers' salary have remained stagnant since the 1990s and even declined recently in the majority of states. It says in some parts of the country, up to a quarter of teachers leave the profession annually, and about 1/5 of the workforce has to resort to a second job. A teaching profession in the U.S. earns less than 60% compared to all professions with similar education background. That, and the ever-growing stressful environment, have made it difficult for teachers to stay in schools, resulting in shortages and massive strikes. In 2018, close to 400,000 teachers around the country went on strike in protest of low wages and to increase school funding. The looming after effect of the pandemic has contributed to this in ways we're starting to see now.
When I started out, $42,000 starting out, but I was without a planning period, which most teachers have 1 to 2 hours of planning. And so I had a fully loaded schedule. And that's why I was making $42,000 instead of $38,000 starting. My first teaching job was in a rural community in Michigan, and it was between Ann Arbor and Lansing, essentially. I was nervous about the school. I was nervous about driving 35 minutes from where I went to college in East Lansing out to this public high school out in kind of the country. And I kind of grew up in the country in that area. So I knew exactly the kind of students that I would be encountering, which was an awesome culture that I ended up being a part of, which was the trucks and the farming and really a tight-knit community. So it was a public school. It was my first teaching job. I was teaching German 1, so that was my major. And they could only offer me 2 hours of German, and that was what I taught. So I taught German 1, but then I also ended up picking up a school-required computer course that was called Business Software Technologies. It was all about the Google platform. So all the Google Drives and Google, but it was also Microsoft. So we did like spreadsheets and learned everything, like dove so deep into Microsoft spreadsheets and making flyers. And it was like really fun, but it was kind of outdated, you know? It was good. I learned a lot for sure, but that's what I was teaching in my first year. So a little bit of what my degree was in, and then some computers. And then first semester, I also did a little bit of the English as a second language coordination, kind of like I kept track of some students in the first semester and how they progressed through the first semester, and kind of help them translate stuff and just kind of make it through that first semester. That's what I was doing my first year. It was a lot. So every single year that I taught was a mix of many things. Yeah. I don't know. I was having a really hard time. I had my internship the year before, and in that year, I was having a really hard time wondering if this was the path I was supposed to be on. Then I got my first job, and I just had to continue to power through it. Like the first year is going to be bad. You know, the first year is going to be bad. It wasn't good. I mean, it was bad, but it felt like there were small victories. I was learning and growing so fast, and a lot just happened in that first year. A lot happened in that first year that I learned so much. I had so many things happening that first year, but I didn't feel I was going to be quitting after that. I didn't have that feeling yet. I was just like, oh, let's get through the first year. First year's going to be rough. Let's get through it. I was either 21 or 22 when I think I was 21 and turned 22 that fall, because I graduated at high school at 17. So I was young for my age or whatever. So I was starting my first teaching job, 21, turned 22 in the fall. I was at this school for 1 year, and then I was at another school for 2 years, and then I was at another school for half a semester. It was 3.5. And then I did a 1-year teaching internship, which had like varied stages of teaching certain amounts of hours every weeks. Like it was, teaching 1 hour for 2 weeks, and then 2 hours for a month, and then 3 hours for a month, and then all the classes for a month, and then go back to 0 classes. So it was like staged teaching, and I did that for a year. And then I entered and did 3.5 years in the classroom of my own room. I really think that the teacher education prep program that I was involved in did a great job. And I think building your confidence up with so then I taught another hour of German 2. So it was the same material, just twice. So then you could teach it once and you could be like, oh, okay, now I have a chance to fix it. And the next time you teach it. So, and then I did that for 2 weeks, so you can really see when you add a class, the ability that you have between hours to shape your own teaching based on how students are responding to it earlier in the day. So by adding in the structured time frame, how it was done was just building up also your stamina to be able to teach multiple hours a day and to switch from maybe teaching German 2 to German 3, so doing that in structured tiers and then going back down to just 1 and having a break for a little bit and then going again to many classes and then down to a couple, it gives you a varied approach to learning and slowing down and looking at everything when you slow down. I was teaching in my first year, 8th through 12th grade. So the 8th graders were German 1 students, and some upperclassmen were in that class when they just randomly decided to take German 1 with the 8th graders. And then the computer class was 9th through 12th grade. Whoever needed to take it, took it. And then after that, I did solely middle school, which was 6th through 8th grade. Actually, I was at a school for 2 years that was just 7th and 8th grade. And then went to a 6th, 7th, 8th grade again. A mix of both. I only did just computers until this last semester of teaching before I quit. It was only computers, but up until that point, it was German, computers, and English as a second language support. And the only way I got into computers is because the certification to become a computer teacher at the time, and now it's becoming more, you have to be more certified to be a computer science teacher, possibly, but at the time was less. So I kind of got into computers when they needed me. And then it just kind of, I had that experience on my resume. So the next job I got was German and computers. Oh, I can fill this weird void of teaching computers without really having a computer degree or anything in computers while I still could do that. And then I got hired again for another computer, like only computers position, which sounded great to me to be focusing on one thing and to move in that direction away from language, because ultimately I only wanted to teach German 1 and 2. I didn't want to teach AP German, let's be real. So I thought computers would be the best way for me to go, maybe just to, go that route and maybe get other certifications in the future, like that may be needed as the career develops. But because computer science in schools is so new, I was able to jump into that without having a degree and still, though, get the job because of my German degree and because of the education degree that I had as well. But that's what I was teaching in my first years.
It is estimated that over 1 million computer science jobs will exist 8 years from now in the future economy, along with software engineering. It is the highest paying undergraduate degree over petroleum engineers.
Through 8th graders and telling them, software is only getting bigger, guys. I mean, we're only going to need people to continuously manage the little apps that you play on your phone and to build new ones. When you're in school, it's really hard to show students just also to be well-rounded. You don't have to be good at everything. I was not. I was like an average, well-rounded student. Never excelled. I fell behind a few years before I started caring, but
I want to point out an honest account here from Jessica. She points out that even she had trouble with education, and that it was only towards her final years of high school she started to really figure out she wanted to be a teacher. In doing so, she also had the opportunity to study in Germany for a year, where she became exposed to a different country's style of teaching.
My major was German. I studied abroad in Germany, and they separate the special needs, or of varying degrees of special needs, mental and physical needs students, into a whole nother school called the special school. And that just hurt me so bad when I was learning to be a teacher. I was like, how could I love the German system so much and their tiered approach? You could take so many different paths, but at the same time, they have another school that's over here called the special school, where they separate all these kids. And I was really grateful to have those kids in my classes with extra adult support. That's why we need extra people to be hired in schools and paid fairly, so that way we have those people that want to work with those students, and we have those roles available to hire people in.
Taking a look at the German education system can be pretty complex. In Germany, every state has different school laws and regulations. Kids from an early age begin to be separated into 3 different schools, all depending on their grades in academics. Yes, there's definitely pressure from an early stage in life. For example, if your grades aren't that good, and it looks like the student in elementary doesn't like school, there's all kinds of different apprenticeship programs you can jump into for all types of jobs that are needed. Mechanic school, construction, plumbing, electrician, all types exist. And if you later decide that you do want to attend a university, you can still do that. What I find fascinating is they start you on a career early in life so that you have more options as you get older. Don't even get me started on the cost of school, because it's practically free in Germany compared to the US. Private, for one, costs less than $5,000 a year to attend.
That's why they need more staff, more certified adults, because those students should, unless you are in a physical harm to others, then, you should be separated. But if you're just slow and you just need an extra adult to explain the directions while the other adult is managing X, Y, and Z crazy students, that's why they need more adults in the classroom. And that's part of my job, was actually to work with those English as a second language students and go into their classroom and to be like a fly on the wall, but then to check in on them and to help them when they needed it, because they would just look at me and I would know, all right, I'm coming over. Everybody in the class knew me. And that was a really great environment to be a push-in teacher.
In this segment, I begin asking Jessica, where did it all start to change? Where did the cracks start to show up? What affected you the most to make you quit?
So the pandemic obviously made it harder, but there was a time in the pandemic when I was like, everything's great. Everything's so good right now. I was actually happy because the students who wanted to be online and who were thriving online were online, and the students who wanted to be in person were in person. So we had kind of smaller class sizes in person, and we were managing those students online who were thriving online, who were greatly independent workers. You know, when it was like a hybrid period, that was good for me. Those students got what they needed. In-person students got what they needed. And there was a lot more respect in the classroom just because we had smaller class sizes, more involvement. There was just like a different air when we all came back with masks. And so those were really good times. And what changed was I went to a different school, and I assumed that this was coming no matter what. I guarantee that little grace period was only a period.
It is estimated that in 2020, 1.5 billion kids were sent home during the pandemic. Teachers had to resort to working through Zoom or Join Me remotely. It was tough and a new way to reimagine education. Some worked and some didn't. Some cameras were off, maybe the occasional sound problem, and some, well, just didn't bother to show up at all. In spring of 2021, it was a different story. Some schools allowed students to come back to class. Some did and some didn't while they got the lesson remotely from a home computer. A new assessment finds that math and reading scores for 9-year-olds in the U.S. have dropped to record lows. The National Center for Education administered exams in early 2020 and in 2022. The average test scores for reading fell by 5 points, and the average for math fell by 7 points. Only since 1990 was there ever a decline in reading to this degree. According to the Department of Labor, nationwide, there are 280,000 fewer teachers now than at the start of the pandemic.
The 2021-22 school year. Pandemic had a detrimental effect on teachers and students. Obviously, parents as well. I feel like parents lacked a lot, and I put a lot of my blame on parents for letting their kids come home and just like run wild. I mean, that was the majority of cases. And not being because a lot of kids, you know, a lot of parents didn't like school. I mean, what do they care if their kid joins the Zoom? A lot of parents didn't for a long time. And so students did get behind, and it became really hard to be a teacher and teaching to 10 kids in a Zoom, and you knew that the other 20 who were supposed to be there were who knows where.
So today
If you heard that, that was by a woman who goes by Mrs. Frazzle, who teaches kindergarten. I found her clip on TikTok. That's a recording of her teaching through Zoom, and a child on the other end suddenly interrupting her lesson every time she spoke. That's just a small, funny example to give you an idea of what it was like.
So it was just really hard. And then when everybody came back and things were more settled, it was just like chaotic because a lot of parents, I feel like, did not teach their kids how to act in different settings. Like in the school, you know, we're like this. At the restaurant, we're like this. At the park, we're like this. And I feel like during that time, there was such a mishmash of all of those settings. It was so like weird for students. They didn't really have a barrier because their home and all of that they were at home all the time. I feel as though settings and boundaries, parents lacked on setting that up for students to go back and to like understand how to treat people and how to act. So it was just really hard. I mean, I think really parents tried for like one solid month, which was like March 2020 into April 2020, and then May 2020 hit, and nobody cared anymore. Nobody cared. Parents didn't care. And then whether your school in the fall of 2020 came back hybrid or all online or...
So when Jessica says hybrid, she means hybrid learning is an educational model where some students attend class in person while others joined the class virtually from home.
Whatever, it didn't matter. Parents were over it. They were like over it. I feel like they were like done calling teachers heroes. They were done with we now understand what teachers are, what they have to go through putting up with Johnny all day. I feel so bad for teachers. We praise them. And the 2020 election was that time. So a whole nother level was, but it just really destroyed a lot of things. I feel like parents cared for a little and a lot of them gave up. I mean, the percentage of parents that I saw come to parent-teacher conferences, 10%. It was pathetic. I could sit there on my phone all parent-teacher conference because nobody was there. It was nice for me, but also not nice. Like, I want to see these kids' parents, I don't want a free hour. Like, I'm supposed to be there and I want to build relationships with the parents, not just like be on my phone because nobody cares and no one's showing up. So yeah, I think it was a lot to do with, I do think parents, I just wish like really stepped it up in that moment. And I feel like it didn't happen. And like things got chaotic coming back to school. Behaviors were crazy. Teachers were just like quitting left and right. And then they weren't like hiring. A lot of teachers quit in, the summer of 2021, I don't even know. Yeah, no, summer of 2020, after the pandemic had first hit, I feel like a lot of people left. But I feel like a lot of people have been pouring out of education. Wow. Or if they're not doing it, they're thinking about it every freaking day. Everybody under 30, every female teacher under 30 is thinking about leaving. Period. Unless you're so deeply passionate because your mom, your grandma, your aunt was a teacher and it's in your fucking blood. I'm not even joking. Like, they're thinking about leaving because of the disrespect, because of the political climate of being a teacher right now. And it's also like being a female, I do think has a lot to do with it. Like, I'm a 5 foot tall female with an interesting body type. And like, I'm just saying, like, it's they don't respect me. They don't. A lot of kids. So, and other teachers would tell me it's literally because you're a young female.
About 75% of teachers are female today. A teacher wage gap exists where men make 27% less and women make 15% less, both with the same level of education.
Things were changing like all the time. Like every 2 months was different for like a year, I feel like, Some like for a while I was at home and then I got brought back and I was teaching in person to students and I had like a Zoom camera on me with other students online. But at first I was all virtual, all at home. I didn't have to come in, which was so nice. Then I was coming in and teaching 2 classes of full students in person and class on the computer on the side. And that was nice too, because I had half of the students who weren't gonna, like, when you're online, those kids, I didn't have an issue with managing outbursts with students online. Maybe at the elementary school level, you have kids who just want to say whatever about whatever on the camera in front of their class. But like middle schoolers and high schoolers, they weren't trying to do that, They weren't trying to like embarrass themselves and have their face blow up on the screen for everyone to see. So it was a lot easier to manage the students online, And then I had a small group in person. It was nice at that time.
I'm walking right out the door. I won't ever be back.
Y'all be wondering why there's such a big teacher shortage. Like, yes, it can be attributed to the low wages that they get paid, but it also has to do with the fact that these kids have no home training. And I know exactly how this type of stuff goes down. A teacher may piss a student off and a student wants to make it a big deal. So they start disrupting class and turning all the students against the teacher. And because it's like a 1 to 20 or 25 ratio, you can't really control everyone if everyone's acting out. And the kid or kids that start this know this. Now, in the past, it usually never gets to the level of the teacher wanting to walk out. But I personally feel like since after COVID, kids have just had less home training than usual. More of a tendency to lash out and act out and antagonize teachers. And the parents ain't doing shit about it. So if there's anybody that needs to do better, it's not just the students. It's the people that parent them at home and teach them about how to treat others. Because I'll tell you right now, if you keep this up, there's going to be an actual crisis in the education system, more so than it already is.
If you heard that, That was a live video clip someone took in class of a teacher walking out in frustration. I found this clip on TikTok by a streamer named Clay Reels. You can hear him talking after and saying something similar to what Jessica was describing. In 2022, kids came back to school harder to work with, not easy to manage. I've heard this many times from different teachers. The level of disobedience had surged widely and out of control, pushing educators over the edge to either resign or walk out of classrooms. I'm not sure who the teacher was, but she looked like she was mid to late 50s. What I take from this is she's clearly been a teacher for many years, and for her to resort to walking out says a lot to what's going on and that we're probably not aware of.
Teachers are teaching consent. They're like, did you ask permission to use so-and-so's pencil? And so-and-so, did you say that that's okay if they use your pen? Like, teachers are managing those relationships all the time. At home, parents aren't really doing that. I'm sorry, but parents are not even managing their own emotions well enough to be able to like emotionally regulate themselves to then teach that to their kids. There's a very small majority of adults who are emotionally regulate. I mean, not a small majority, but you know what I mean? If you're a struggling parent, very few struggling parents are emotionally regulated themselves to be able to demonstrate that to their child. So that really played out when those students were at home all the time and then came back and teachers are trying to help students learn to regulate and cope. Yeah, it was really hard. The cycle is you get into teaching because you love students, right? Then you work, and for me, I wasn't just handed lessons. I was developing my own content based on state standards, and that took a lot of creativity out of me in its own way to develop my own lessons, right? And of course, I was beg, borrowing, and stealing from others, but it still takes a lot of effort to be a creative mind every single day and adjust to your students after school, and then come in ready to go the next day with an adjusted plan. So the cycle is that you get into teaching because you love teaching. You put literally your all into planning these lessons on your own time because 1 hour of paid planning time is not enough. And then you go into school where you have, say, 28 kids in a room. I would say 16 to 18 of them are trying to derail you completely, or they're trying to distract others completely. So they're either trying to like literally derail the teacher or distract others and just be in all around, like just trying to throw things off. And then there's the other 10 to 12 that are calm and listening and respectful and maybe like a handful that are like getting annoyed with the students. So I remember one year was crazy. I had 32 students, like 30 of them were boys and 30 of them were boys in a small room. And it was insane, you know? So there's just too many kids. And then there's like sometimes an imbalance of these kids shouldn't have been put together. Like they are skipping school. They have been skipping school for multiple grades together. Why did they get put in the class? You know, like what happened there? So then it happens to be 10 people who are completely derailing the class or trying to create trying to play music off of some device, trying to play a game, like clicking constantly, like touching, pushing, like just so many things while I'm trying to like give direct instruction for like no more than 15 minutes, like no more than 15 minutes, guys, no more than that. And then it's so painful. So you're putting a lot of time into planning a lesson. And even as much as you break it down into smaller sections, then you're trying to manage kids going from section to section, break it down into smaller chunks. I mean, it's fine to scaffold it into different learning chunks, but the idea of like, I'm constantly having to like redirect them into another thing. It's like, then they get off for a few minutes in between, because if I have to give directions 3 times in a class for 3 different activities, it's just hard to get them to refocus.
A study done by the National Center for Education Statistics said that student behaviors most frequently reported as having increased during the 2021 and 2022 school year, where classroom disruptions from students' misconduct rose to 56%, acts of disrespect towards teachers and staff rose to 48%, rowdiness outside of the classroom rose to 49%, the prohibited use of electronic devices rose to 42%. Also, public schools reported a 49% increase in teacher absenteeism during the 2021 and 2022 school year. Public schools reported needing more support for student or staff mental health to at least 79%. Training on supporting students' socio-emotional development rose to 70%. The hiring of more staff rose to 60%, and the training on classroom management strategies rose to 51%.
It's just a lot. It's a lot to think about planning the day. And then you go and you spend all your time after school planning a good lesson. And for the first few years of teaching, I was up planning until midnight every day. And I didn't go to bed until like 2 a.m. And then I would wake up at 5:30. Or I'd go to bed at 1 a.m. and wake up at 5:30. I was getting a few hours of sleep. That was killing me, And that's all because I didn't want to stay after school until 8 p.m. So I would go home and I would make myself food instead of, having to pack for eating dinner at school to work at school until 8 p.m. So I would come home and eat food and then I would immediately start working. And I couldn't stay after school until my work needed to get done because then it was literally dark out. And I hated going home and it being already so late. And then I was like, okay, well, now I'm getting home at really late and I'm going to just shower and go to bed. So I would go home first and cook a meal and spend time relaxing with the housemates I was living with at the time. And then I would get down to working for hours until I felt like it wasn't going to be derailed the next day. So anyways, I spent a lot of energy in my lesson planning and then to come to school the next day and have it be chaotic and the kids actively trying to break me down, in personal ways and in other ways, just trying to derail the lesson, whether it's trying to get me to talk about my personal life, trying to get me to tell a story, or trying to literally just be obnoxious in so many varieties, so many forms. It's just a lot to constantly be dealing with. And then you don't get anything done. But the main problem was really just being straight up disrespected when all you wanted to do was see that student succeed and you don't even care if they get a D in your class, a C in your class. You want to see them learn something and to have a goal and to reach that goal. That's my main thing as well. I taught goal setting and I made sure to incorporate goal setting in my class. So whatever it is that don't lie to me and tell me you're going to get an A if you know that computers is not your thing and you're hoping for a C or a B minus. Whatever it is your goal is, I want you to be real and be honest and to work towards whatever that is. So it was really hard when I wanted whatever was best for the student. Sometimes they're so young and so hormonal in the middle school age that they want to push against any sort of adult, even if I'm literally the chillest adult they're ever going to have as a mentor and teacher. I'm 22 years old. I literally feel like I was in middle school last week, bro. Can you relax and stop treating me piece of dog shit? They'll literally middle finger to the face, doors slamming, middle finger, just crazy things that they'll say to me. Yeah, well, my derp, blah, 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 the things that they say, it's crazy, but it was just a lot. It was a lot. So to put in so much effort and to be then disrespected and to have everything derailed, but in a variety of ways, some disrespectful things were just the kid is overstimulated because there's other kids who are overstimulating them because I'm trying to teach, I'm trying to keep a mellow, chill room, but there's others that are overstimulating other students and taking away. And just so many things are going on in the classroom. It's so hard to deal with. Not only that, but the mental health aspect.
It is said that 10% of youth have conduct problems. 17% of youth have mental health issues, such as anxiety, depression, ADHD, and of course, the societal risk factors outside of school like physical abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, physical neglect, emotional neglect, mentally ill parent, drug or alcohol use by caregiver, domestic violence, incarcerated parent, losing a parent by death or divorce or abandonment. There are many variables to account for in a child's upbringing, thus sometimes giving way to aggression towards peers, lack of problem-solving skills, coercive behavior towards others, or sometimes just by moving to a different place can have an effect. This can further lead to school failure and dropout, delinquency, drug and alcohol use, gang membership, violent acts, adult criminality, lifelong dependency on welfare system, higher death and injury rate, to all negative long-term outcomes.
You have students who, something's going on, and the counselors say something's going on, or, you know a lot as a teacher. You might not know everything, but you know a lot. And you become so emotionally invested in students' lives, yet you only see them for an hour a day. And then you see them all teachers see them for 7 or 8 hours a day. And then they go home to whatever crazy environment they're subjected to at home, which they don't have any control over. And then they come back to school and they want to retaliate and take it out on another adult who is seriously caring about them and who gives their heart and soul to students. And, parents, I get it. Parents have stressful lives. They go to work and they have jobs and they have to come home, and then they have to tend to their kids who have to do homework and have to shower and get to sleep by a certain time. So being a parent is stressful, but kids then, if their life is not managed well at home after school, they're going to come back to school and they're going to retaliate and take that out on the teacher. And as somebody who literally gives their heart and soul to education and to wanting to do what's best for the individual student, that kills you internally. That kills you. I can't do that repetitively. And it was coming to a breaking point, where I was in the classroom teaching and I was like, okay, you know what, guys? I'm done talking. I am done talking because I'm not going to stand here and be talked over every second. I'm not going to do it. And it came to a breaking point of then you have kids that are literally laughing at me when I'm on the verge of tears, because they're and then they love that buildup. They love to see me get to that breaking point, and they do it over and over again. And I've been to that breaking point where I have been just let me get through 5 minutes, please. And then you can go on your computers and do the lesson or not do the lesson. Your choice, and I'll be here to support you in whatever decision you want to make. You deal with the consequences, but let me get through the instructions for those who want to do it. Okay. And just not even being able to speak and then having kids just constantly tear you down to that breaking point. It is exhausting. And then I had kids, a 13 or 14-year-old who is jumping up and down, screaming, I'm gonna throw a fit. I'm gonna throw a fit. And then slamming their body on the ground, kicking another student's chair, actively just really crazy behaviors that you'd see from a toddler at a store. It's so bizarre. And that's what they're going into crazy behaviors just to derail the class. And for me to stand there and just be and to have to take a deep breath and to just not respond. Oh my God, it takes every fiber of my being to not blow up, and I have blown up way too many times and cracked too many times where there's too much going on and I'm crying and I'm stepping in the hallway right now. I'm crying and I'm stepping in the hallway legitimately because of how bad it has gotten in the class where I didn't feel like I had control. There were times where other male teachers have come into my room when I have stepped out to cry because then they just give them this horrible glare, the male teacher can. It's terrible. I step outside to cry, legit cry. And someone else has come in for me and been that's really what you want to do for your teacher. That's really the way you want to treat her. Teachers are going to literally saying to the kids, if you don't stop, we're going to lose, you know what I mean? Literally telling the kids, do you want to treat your teachers so badly that they don't want to come in? And having to give them that kind of talking to. And they just don't, some of them don't stop. Some of them only got worse, I feel like. And some of them said, oh, if you can't handle this, why don't you quit? You know what? I did.
Wow.
I did quit, and I feel so much better about it. And you know what? Some of those kids probably think to themselves, I don't know what they think. Honestly, I don't know what they think because they're 13-year-olds and 14-year-olds or whatever, and I let them get the better of me. But at the same time, I am not going to deal with it. That's not how it was when I went to school. That's not how it was before the pandemic. That's not how it should be. I don't care if you have okay, I get it. If you have ADHD and you have mental health problems or you have autism and you need special fidgets, you need special just something to hold and to mess with. I am so okay with that. I was okay with students having snacks as long as they cleaned up. I was so lenient about all the different things that students needed to be accommodated in their own individual ways. And yet it's just like you're being ran over when you're that nice. You give a little bit I want to accommodate everybody perfectly, and I tried my hardest to accommodate all my students. And that's not the problem. Accommodations are not the problem, but the problem is students who really want to derail and take away from everyone else to be the funny guy or to, I don't know, maybe it's, again, it's maybe chaotic home life. They come into school and kind of want to take it out on someone who's like genuinely serious about like loves them just for like who they are. And just because they're like a kid and you just understand the value of education and raising a child to be a good person. And it just hurts your soul to be dealing with disrespect at that level, which I haven't dealt with before. And to care so much and then to realize in the end, what am I really doing? What difference am I making? But then I think about those students who came to me and said, listen, I'm about to check myself in to a mental hospital because I tried to kill myself over the weekend. What should I do? Then you're like, holy shit, this kid is coming to me as a trusted adult. What should I do with my life? Like, I tried to kill myself. What should I do? And then you feel, oh my God, you're that trusted adult for at least one person. And that is what keeps you going. Well, I had two adults in the school whose job was to be a teacher coach. So I could go to them during my planning period and I could be like, hey, I'm really struggling with X, Y, and Z, whether it was behavior or lesson planning or like brainstorming ideas, whatever it was, I could go to them for help. Where it really came down to lacking support is in mental health and behaviors. And when you only have 2 counselors for 600 students, and there are kids talking about committing suicide versus kids disrupting class, that's a huge discrepancy of urgency. And so lots of things get put to the back burner when you're dealing with huge problems or that are just like immediately need to be dealt with for the students' physical safety. And, it's so hard for 2 counselors to deal with that varying degree and also that many students, so we need more mental health support in the schools, more behavioral support, more other people who are like certified behavioral specialists who work in the classroom with students and teachers so that students can teach or teachers can teach all, but so that other specialist can help to break it down further and to manage that student's behaviors so that they can be also integrated into the classroom, but just a lot more adults support for behaviors and mental health is necessary.
There is a form of empathy fatigue that teachers develop over time for students. In other words, compassion, an awareness of suffering that later burns out the teacher. In some form, your pain becomes my pain. Empathetic stress can become debilitating for a teacher over time, maybe judge themselves and others unfairly. They can begin to distort reality. They can feel oriented on the past and how things were different before. Or become future-oriented, like maybe I need to find something else or a way out of this. All that can lead to chronic burnout over time.
You care so much and maybe the student is having such a hard time in class that they're leaving to go to the bathroom for 20 minutes to cry. And then they come back to your class and you're like, oh, it's okay if you need to take a walk. And you're trying to be that safe adult. Take a breather. It's okay. Whatever's going on is temporary. You're giving literal mental health advice to students. And then you go home and you're trying to detach when you're lesson planning, but you're really planning for those kids too. You never stop thinking about the fact that so-and-so has, just 8 siblings and 1 mom or it's just these things. Teachers, kids blurt stuff out. So what they've seen and what they've experienced, whether you want to or not. And so it's a lot to take home. I didn't sleep last night because my parents were arguing and then derp and one of my students' dads shot up the inside of their house and that was like on the news. You know what I mean? Like you just know when things are hitting the news with your students that it's really hard to ignore that. Like it's just so hard to not take that home. I have a really hard time. Like I am empathetic. I care for these kids. I can't just like come home from my day and be like completely forgetting about every stress like from the school day, because I'll remember that so and so said something deranged and off the rails. Like I overheard a student who said that her older brother picked her up by the neck and hung her against a wall, and I had to go to the counselor and be like, did you know that the older brother is like physically harmful to these little girls? And they're like, oh yeah, we know that the brother doesn't see them anymore. And it's just like you overhear those things that you don't necessarily want to hear, then they do affect you. And then you go home later and you think about, how am I going to deal with this? How am I going to deal with this? And I've seen, when a vape falls out of a kid's pocket.
In 2018 alone, the U.S. Surgeon General reported an alarming 78% increase in high school students vaping. It was reported that the global e-cigarette market was valued at $15 billion in 2018. That has now doubled in 2023. That and the creative appealing flavors have made it more enticing for kids and adults. The FDA estimates that in 2022, that 1 in 10 kids in middle school have vaped at least once.
How am I going to deal with it? Do you know what I mean? Like you have to be like, you're making so many high stress decisions. It just really weighs on you. It really weighs on you, whether you try to separate it or not. And I don't have the power, apparently. Like I don't know what kind of power people have to separate it, but like all these little things that students say, just I'll be in the shower and like something will pop into my head that happened throughout the day. And it's like, oh yeah, I have to deal with that. Oh yeah, I have to deal with that. Oh yeah, I have to call so-and-so's blah, blah, blah. It never stops, these little things, because you're dealing with real people's lives, real kids' lives. On the topic of mass shootings, I have been teaching with a fear for every year I've been in the classroom that I am going to be that classroom that gets shot up. No joke, that's a fear of mine. I was in a false alarm shooting at my university at Michigan State in 2014 where they thought a gunman had entered the building, and they sent a text message to everyone saying a gunman is in this building, and I was put on lockdown for only like 5 to 10 minutes, but that 5 to 10 minutes made me feel like I could be killed right now. There's a gunman possibly killing students below me right now. And that left me traumatized. So yes, that fear stayed with me into teaching.
It's hard to get into this subject, but just yesterday while working on this, another school shooting happened in Nashville, Tennessee, where 3 kids and 3 adults died. It seems like just another year in the countless school shootings that happen across America. This is a list of school shootings since Columbine: Red Lake, Minnesota; Parkland, Florida; Virginia Tech; Oikos University; Nickel Mines, Pennsylvania; Sandy Hook, Connecticut; Santa Fe, Texas; Blacksburg, Virginia; Rosebud, Oregon; Booker Community College; Valde, Texas; Santa Monica College; Robb Elementary; Northern Illinois University; Deming, New Mexico; Michigan; Lake Worth, Florida; Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School; Fort Gibson, Oklahoma; Seattle, Washington; New Orleans, Louisiana; San Diego, California. Unfortunately, this list goes on and on. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, in 2000 to 2021, the number of casualties per year as a result of school shootings ranged from 15 to 185. In 2020 and 2021 alone, there were 118 casualties, 46 deaths, and 72 injuries from school shootings. Each day, 12 children die from gun violence in America. Another 32 are shot and injured. Since Columbine in 1999, more than 338,000 students in the U.S. have experienced gun violence at school. Researching this topic, I came across Sandy Hook Promise, a website that is helping create awareness in school shooting prevention. I found some interesting facts on their site. An estimate of 4.6 million American children live in a home where at least one gun is kept loaded and unlocked. These improperly stored weapons have contributed to school shootings, suicides, and deaths of family members, including infants and toddlers. Nearly half of all parents with a weapon in the home wrongly believe their children don't know where their gun is stored. 68% of guns used in gun-related incidents at school were taken from home, a friend, or relative. Almost all mass school shooters shared threatening or concerning messages or images. More than 75% raised concern from others prior to the attack. Bystanders saw the warning signs in most documented active shooter cases. About 1 out of 5 gay and lesbian youth have been threatened or injured with a weapon in school. Children of color are far more likely to experience campus gun violence. It's more than twice as much for Hispanic students, and over 3 times as much for Black students. 90% of teenagers killed in an act of dating violence were girls. In a comprehensive school shooting study, the Secret Service and Department of Education found that 93% of school shooters planned the attack in advance. When people see the signs and get help, we can end school shootings. I offer prior warning to this next part, but please skip ahead a minute. It gives grim detail of hand accounts of being shot at while being at school and having survived. I found this recording done by New York Magazine on their YouTube channel.
Because it hurt. I didn't know what it was. It was really, really forceful. I likened it to getting hit with like a sledgehammer or something because it was just so forceful.
This force hit my leg above my knee that shook my whole body.
It was such a shock. You don't feel it. You didn't feel it like that. You just felt the weight of the capacity of the ground as it hit you.
I could feel it just boom. And I could feel it spinning, and I could feel that it was hot.
And it felt like I just gently went down, but according to the video, I smacked the wall and slid straight down.
I felt like I floated down to the ground, and even the impact of hitting the ground didn't hurt.
And this like sharp, burning, stinging feeling above my knee, which then kind of went this warm wetness and then just kind of numb from head to toe.
And I felt everything from here on down in my body wash away in a wave of numbness.
I don't feel anything, and I'm kind of touching my body, and I'm like, what's going on?
I looked at it, I could see the...
Personally, I can recall not too long ago, a young teen named Javi I went on a camping trip with, about 3 months ago died by gun violence on a street fair in LA. In regards to this, I think about losing my own father to gun violence at the age of 16. I wonder if there will ever be some kind of accountability. If gun violence can be prevented. It is estimated that some congressmen receive upwards of tens of thousands a month in donations from the National Rifles Association to keep restrictions off the table, to keep gun reform from happening. It's a topic that is defined by greed and pure financial interest. By nothing being done by government to prevent this homicidal epidemic, we will continue to endlessly be bystanding victims of mass shootings everywhere.